Welcome to Myco Minute, conversations about collaboration brought to you by the capacity creators at Myco Consulting, LLC, where we help higher ed, nonprofit, and philanthropic leaders advance the initiatives they care about most.
Welcome to Myco Minute. I'm Deb Mashek, and today I have the delight of speaking with Amy Cronin, who's the Executive Director of New York 6 and is a member or a board member of the Association for Collaborative Leadership. And we're going to be sure to talk about both New York 6 and ACL here in a minute. But first of all, Amy, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Well, Deb, thank you so much for asking me to join you. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. So I thought we should start with New York 6. So, you know, the name kind of gives a couple pieces of information away. So as people might have guessed, these are 6 institutions in New York. But who are the institutions, which ones, what are they doing together? And then how does your office support their work?
So the New York 6 Liberal Arts Consortium, which is our way too long name, is 6 liberal arts colleges in upstate New York, kind of stretched across upstate. We're about 4 hours end to end. And the schools are Colgate University, Hamilton College, Hobart and William Smith Colleges, St. Lawrence University, Skidmore College, and Union College. And so, you know, 6 really fine liberal arts colleges that determined about 10 years ago that they probably should be thinking about ways to connect more proactively. And out of those discussions, which were initially supported by the Mellon Foundation, the New York 6 Consortium was born.
And so for those who maybe don't know much about how consortia are structured, New York 6 is its own entity?
We are not. Some consortia are. We are not. We are administered through Hamilton College, which agreed, 10 years ago to be the administrative home, and we've never let go of that relationship. So some consortia, as you know, are independent legal entities, but we've been able to do everything we've wanted to do without having to go that route. So we'll continue with it until we need to do otherwise, I think.
And I love that I just made one of the classic errors of if you know about one consortia, you only know really about one other consortia, and you can't assume that the knowledge generalizes, which brings me to the Association for Collaborative Leadership. And this is like a consortia of consortia, I might describe it. I've had a couple other members of ACL on, but never one of the board members. So I'm wondering if you can, talk to us about what ACL is and why it's so important for the work you're doing at New York 6.
ACL is an organization that, honestly, having spent my entire career in higher education, I had never heard of until I became a consortium leader, which is a shame, because it not only supports those of us who are engaged in the work of running consortia or running programs within consortia, but it also is a place that will help people understand how to build collaborations. You don't have to be running a consortium or working for a consortium in order to benefit from this, because there's collaboration all around us in higher education, within campuses, across campuses, from one department to another on a campus. So really, I think our goal is to try to foster collaboration wherever it might grow in higher education. And we're working as a board to actively think about ways to expand awareness of the programs and work that we do so that others will join in and not feel like it's exclusive to being in a consortium, staffing situation. Originally, when I became involved 10 years or so ago in ACL, it was called the Association for Consortium Leadership. And the board very intentionally changed that name to make it about collaboration and not just consortia.
I love that because I'll share that when I was over at the Claremont colleges and helping academic collaboration blossom across these institutions, that's when I first heard about ACL. I fell in love with it, and then I started to go, it basically felt like collaboration camp and, learning some of the ropes and figuring out how to do this. And the community at ACL is incredible. So when I, moved over more solidly into the solo collaboration consulting. Is that even a thing, to be a solo? Anyway, one of the first things I did was reached back out to ACL, and it felt like such a homecoming of, oh yes, here are the people who like to talk about how you get, how you bridge across different interests and actually get the ball moving on complex collaborations in these very nuanced academic environments. So I'm a huge ACL fan. We'll put it in the show notes, as they say.
Absolutely. It's a tremendous resource for people, and such a supportive group of people, whether it's, not just within the board, but on any of the webinars or things, you're always finding someone you have something in common with. When we are able to have our conferences, even this year when we did it virtually, I mean, the connections that I made through that were, where you're throwing a note to somebody in the chat saying, I'd love to hear more about that. We're thinking about something similar, so it's a great place to get ideas, to bounce ideas off of people who understand the challenges of collaboration and who have successfully navigated that. So I think it's a wonderful organization. I'm thrilled to be a part of it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So everyone, you should all come join ACL.
Everybody join, exactly.
Everybody, yeah. So over the past year, we've obviously all been in the COVID context, and you've really had, I see it as a front row seat, both to the conversations that were happening at New York 6, but you're also, by virtue of, you're just a very helpful person, but also on the ACL board. So you're talking to all these different consortial-minded folks about how they're navigating COVID. I'm wondering if you can share what you see as some of the most delightful wins, things that people were doing together where you're like, yes, they made it happen.
I think for me, the number one thing that I have been really pleased to see and be a part of in the New York 6, but I've heard it from other consortium leaders as well, is the fact that in this moment of great turmoil and need for support, for help, for ideas to make sure you're not losing your mind, with all these things coming at you, that people have turned to their colleagues in the New York 6. And so we have had over the past year an explosion of groups and meetings and people wanting to connect with their colleagues across the 6 campuses. And a couple of groups that, I just am so pleased about, the presidents. Now, they met frequently, they'd occasionally email, they met twice a year in person. We'd have some conference calls, they'd email each other once in a while. But when things started to really hit with COVID last, February, we started having meetings. And it was like, we need to talk, we need to know what, we need, the person who was our chair at the time, I think we should bring everybody together. We got to talk about spring breaks and what everybody's doing, how they're planning for the return after spring breaks. Of course, none of that. The return never happened, but anyway. And so we got a call together quickly. And as they got through the call, I was like, okay, when are we going to talk again next? How about next Thursday? And they just were meeting regularly. Until summer, they were meeting just about every other week. And then, and continued, the pace slowed a little over the summer, but then picked right back up in the fall. So the presidents have really leaned on one another for information, for counsel, for, advice. Well, what factors did you consider in making that decision? Those kinds of conversations. The other group that came together was the president's, I'll call it, they don't all have this title, but the president's chief of staff group. Mm-hmm. So they're, kind of lead advisors who were typically their point person with their COVID planning group. And so they were all talking about, very nuts and bolts kinds of things, PPE and barriers and how many people in this, configuration. And it was really gratifying. And then there was the whole IT side of things, because of course, everything was going virtual. And so that group was in constant communication. I worked a lot with that group to make sure they had all the capacity they needed on Zoom. We got a bunch of things that we were able to do on trials, so they didn't have to pay for them because, they needed large meeting Zooms, but just for like a couple of weeks. So all right, we'll do it as a trial thing and then it'll end and you don't owe us anything. So I was able to really step in and help them get a lot of the stuff that they needed from a technology standpoint. pretty quickly. And rather than having each of them going separately, I was able to step into that coordinating role for them, so that our account person at Zoom just had to deal with me. And she didn't have 45 different people reaching out to her. So there were some things like that. And then existing groups, the deans of faculty and their associate deans in contact about what are you doing, as far as planning ahead for instruction in the fall. And out of that grew some collaborative work relative to summer faculty development programming to help the faculty gear up for these hybrid classes they were going to have to teach and figure out how in God's name they were going to do that. And so it was just very gratifying. And it seemed like, every day something new was coming up. It was incredibly busy, in a different kind of busy than I typically would have. But it was very gratifying because they were coming to me, they were reaching out to each other in our various listservs, and really it got a lot of value out of their relationships that have been built over time. And it was really wonderful to see that.
And what strikes me about it is there's the shared challenge, and then there's this cadre of people who are both invested in your success, but also you don't have to make the same decision they do. And so they're able to bounce ideas and the questions off of each other. And then ultimately, in most of these cases that you're talking about, can come to their own decisions about, what they actually want to do, or they can choose to join forces. And
Right.
One of the things that strikes me as I'm listening to you talk about this is you're using the word I, like they came to you. And so I'm wondering, so they started to rely on these relationships with each other. What about their relationship with you as this person who facilitates the work across the campuses?
Well, we have a very good relationship and a lot of trust, and and they know that I'm here to help. But I've also been able, over the years that we've been doing this, I've been able to position myself exactly as you say, as a facilitator. I'm not someone who's telling them you have to do this or you have to do that. It's just, all right, let me see what I can find out. Let me be a resource for you. I really tried to position myself during COVID and even before that as kind of the extra person they might need to track down some information and that sort of thing. And so I try to, help, but not be in the way, and it's just been good. I mean, I think the fact that we have been working together for so long, and and they just know they can come and ask, and I'll give them a straight answer if there's something they want that I don't think we can get or do or whatever. But we do, I think the flexibility you mentioned, the fact that that's can we look into this, but they're not obligating themselves to do anything. And I do consider it a we with these 6 schools. Their problems are my problems.
Yeah.
If they can't get some, materials that they need, if they can't, figure out something, that's not just, well, that's your problem, you figure it out. That I take that as my challenge. And so we really have this sort of, we're all in it together. And it's really gratifying then to see them able to get through this incredibly challenging time that really has upended residential liberal arts education in significant ways, along with every other kind of institution. But they've, really had to put themselves outside their comfort zone in terms of the way they work. And it's been really a great source of gratification and pride to see them get through this as we see graduation on the horizon.
And I love that image of you as a capacity creator too, of being
Right.
that utility player, because everybody, was drinking. I'm looking at the date. Are we through this yet?
Not quite.
A fire hose to
Yeah.
try to handle all the things that were coming so fast, and to have somebody that you can turn to,
Right.
for the research, for the facilitation, for that. Can you be the Zoom call person?
Yeah.
Amazing. I'm curious to get your intuition, your prediction for how these relationships, what they're going to look like over the next year, over the next 5 years. Do you anticipate this momentum will, probably not, people won't keep meeting every week, but what do you think is going to happen next with these relationships?
I think they'll continue. I do think we'll have, you know, a bit of a step back in terms of the frequency and whatnot. But now that they've established this, you know, way of really coming together, I think it will continue. We have a new president coming aboard this summer at one of the institutions, and she and I have already been in contact. She's, you know, going to join the May meeting of the presidents, and you know, because she's eager to kind of have this group of colleagues. She said, you know, I hear they're the go-to, you know, so I'm really gratified that, you know, that is what the expectation is at that level. And that's trickled down, I think, to others. So I do think we'll be able to keep up the momentum. I think we'll, you know, there have been some groups that have not been able to be as active as they normally would, you know, some of our student affairs related groups, for example, because they just had way too much to do. And that's one of the cases where it was like, all right, I'm going to get out of the way and we'll just stay in touch. And they exchange email and you know, things like that with the listserv, but they haven't met. And so we'll get back to that. And a couple of them have already said, so we should start thinking about how we can get together in the fall, you know. So I think they're, you know, the New York Six is just, it's just part of their toolbox now. And so it'll continue to be, for sure.
And, you know, you touched on this a little bit earlier too, but the role of the established relationship and the trust, and to now I mean, these are people now you've worked with intensely for the past, obviously for some of them, many years, but really,
right, yeah.
You know, meeting every week, it's, these are your people, confidants.
They are, it is. And, you know, and it's, and they're, I mean, you know, this, you know, working in higher ed, it's, you get to know people, you get to know their story, you get to know what they're passionate about in their work, but also as people. And, you know, you recognize, you start to understand the you know, quirks of how they like to work, and it makes the work a whole lot easier. I mean, I've been doing this work longer than I've held any other single role in my career. And I'm not tired of it, you know. It's because, you know, there is a little bit of change. There are new things to pursue all the time, and they're a great set of institutions and a really good group of people.
Yeah. So what about for those higher ed leaders who are perhaps consortially or collaboratively minded, but don't yet have a community like this? What advice can you offer for kind of launching or initiating some of these relationships without necessarily being in a formal consortium, whether it's in the COVID context or beyond?
I think that you know, the key thing is to understand from your own perspective where you think collaboration can help you build capacity, do things more effectively or efficiently. You know, our mission in the New York Six is kind of twofold. It's to, you know, create efficiencies and cost saving through collaboration, but it's also to expand opportunities for faculty, staff, and students. And so I would say to, you know, campus leaders, you know, think about places where there's something you either can't do or can't do well on your own. And then think about people. I think some level of proximity. We're not real close. Like I said, we're 4 hours end to end, but we're close enough that we can, you know, get groups together from time to time. And of course, now we're all used to doing everything on Zoom, so it's a little less important. But I do think that identifying some partners and just pick a thing and do it. You know, don't overthink it, don't overplan it. You don't have to have a consortium per se. The one thing I would say is you do have to have somebody, whether it's a staff person who you can free up some time for and make this a priority for them. You need somebody who's responsible for thinking about this every day or every other day maybe, you know, but who's really focused on this in a proactive, concerted way. Because if it's just kind of left out there, it doesn't happen because things get in the way of it. And so, and really, you know, be open to the conversations, you know, start the conversations and then, you know, be open to them. And, you know, the New York Six started with the presidents in conversation. And then it kind of got pushed down, you know, to others. And at first it was hard to get them to rally around, because they were kind of being told, we have this thing and the Mellon Foundation is giving us some money to figure out some collaboration. So we need to do this. And over time, it got to a point where they were like, so can the Mellon grant cover this? Because we'd like to do this, So once they got in those conversations with one another, they saw the opportunity. So that's my advice, is get in that conversation. Don't worry about structure and all of this. Just figure out, we want to think about study abroad and how we can do that more efficiently and more effectively, and draw more students, create more opportunities for our students. Just get those people together to start talking about what it might look like, and something will grow out of that.
And I love that advice too, around it's the mantra of taking imperfect action. Like, especially at the beginning, you don't need a ton of structures and memoranda of understanding and, formal agreements. In fact, I think sometimes that formality can actually choke a developing relationship.
I'll let you in on a little secret.
Yeah.
We don't have any memoranda of understanding.
And you've survived 10 years doing amazing things.
We're okay. We have some operating principles that everyone's agreed to, but that's it.
And I love too the idea that you need someone who can carry the ball every day. So, there just informally a lot of collaborations that pop up, like we should do something together, and it can be so hard to actually build momentum and have somebody who says, it's okay, I got it, I'll carry this one for us.
Yeah, who's going to be the lead, right? Exactly. And even within our IT group, which has been our most active area, we still ask, as we take on a new initiative, one of the CIOs will agree to be what we call the CIO sponsor of the activity. So the group that's working on it knows they have one person to go to get some advice or counsel or bounce ideas off of, rather than each of them going to their CIO, and then it becomes this mishmash of reaction. Sort of like, okay, you're going to this person, they're going to give you some feedback based on what they know and the trust they have with the CIO group, and and so you can keep the work going. It's been a successful model.
Yeah, that's a great structure, because it both honors that this is, you got a lot of skilled partners from a lot of different cross-functional areas trying to come together to do something, but you also, it's not in anyone's interest to be actually in conversation with everybody all at once. That can just get too much of a tangled web.
Right.
What about, I'm curious what you see as the cost of inaction. So if someone's kind of like, oh, I should do, or we should do something together, what do you see? I mean, how do you make the case? Like, how do you see the cost of inaction?
In some cases, it's a real cost, to be honest. On the cost saving side of things, I can't make anybody buy things together or, go in on a shared service or something, but I can calculate what the savings were for the schools that chose to participate, and therefore what the schools that chose not to missed out on. And I'm not above doing that so from time to time. Well, as a means of saying, this opportunity still exists, and here's what the other schools are saving. If you want to reconsider, come on in. We'd love to have you. On the programmatic side, it's a little bit more difficult to, calculate that missed opportunity. But I do think what people miss out on is an ease of engaging with other people and bringing new perspectives to your work that you can have through collaboration, particularly if you're doing it on a more regional basis, which many consortia are regional in nature. And because then you can get together, you have common challenges. Our schools are in upstate New York, primarily in rural communities that are not all that easy to get to. So to find a faculty member you can collaborate with on developing some materials for a course you teach in common, or lecturing in one another's courses, that sort of thing. It's an easy thing to do, and then that person's nearby. You're building community, and a community that you can actually connect with in an easier way when we're not in pandemic times and people can actually be in the same room together. And so I think that, the opportunity cost of not collaborating is that you remain siloed, and we're just not in a world where you can do that anymore. You know, as an institution or as a department, you know, you will be stronger through the connections that you have, whether it's as an individual or as an institution. I believe in that, you know, very firmly. And I think, you know, that's evidenced by the fact that many grant makers now show preference for, you know, from the federal government on down, show a preference for projects and programs that have a collaborative aspect.
And that's a topic I have earmarked for a future Myco Minute, is the role of the philanthropist in both kind of energizing some of this work, but then also really being thought partners to sustain it and to think innovatively around it. So something we can grab onto for a future conversation.
I'll look forward to hearing that, because I think that's an important aspect of all this work.
And so, Amy, for those who are interested in learning more about you or New York 6 or ACL, give us some links and I'll be sure to put them in the show notes.
I am easily reached at A Cronin at newyork6.org. Our website is newyork6.org. It's not ideal right now. We're undergoing a renovation, so keep an eye out for that this summer. Excuse me. And then I'm at Twitter at Amy D Cronin, and we're also at New York 6.
Okay, I will be sure that all of those are there. And speaking of, you know, revamping and updates, a little announcement from Myco. I finally got around to writing case studies to highlight some of the work I've done with some of the clients over the years, and those are up on the website. So if you'd like to go check those out, please do. And anyone who would like to, you know, schedule a meeting while you're there to talk about your situation, know that I would be all ears and would be most welcoming of that. So, Amy, thank you for joining me for this conversation. It's been such a delight. I look forward to our next chat.